You are transported back to the year 1600. What could you realistically build all by yourself that hadn't been invented yet? Story 1. Cuisine. This is 150 years before the sandwich was invented. While the hash of available ingredients is severely limited, I could still blow everyone's mind. Food is also an effective form of diplomacy, and I'd build a sandwich-based world peace between major powers. It would be a better world. Story 2. Probably nothing. We vastly overestimate our actual knowledge of stuff we take for granted, and underestimate how difficult it'd be to simply get the materials to build a thing. And let's ignore the backlash our great inventions or theories would receive. Story 3. I doubt I could do it, but I would try to somehow integrate myself into the scientific community of the time, and nudge them towards certain ideas. I might suggest to investigate certain phenomena thoroughly. If I am too overbearing, I would probably get hanged or just ignored. Story 4. Rack and pinion, worm and wheel, and other transitional ways of transferring water power to machine movements that I learned as an engineer, as above using elementary and metallurgy methods to extract electricity from water turbines. Basic understanding of how the American continent has majority of raw materials and ecological resources to exploit. Story 5. A town center community forum with multiple sub-forums. Each sub-forum is ran by a moderator. The townspeople wear masks to protect their true identities. A topic is brought up and everyone tries to be funny or clever. And the best comments get ayes, and the worst comments get nays. And a scribe counts who gets the most ayes and declares a winner. Then a new topic is brought up. Story 6. A glider. The mechanics overall of a glider are pretty simple and could be made with easy-to-find and manage materials. The precision isn't crazy, which helps a ton. A few practice miniatures and I think I could pull it off. A successful glider would get me the attention to get more complex things built. Story 7. It's never really going to be by myself. I'll need the support of some people, so the main challenge is to convince the right people that I'm on to something. Then, with the right environment, I think my main influence is going to be teaching stuff rather than building. I can teach some important stuff that isn't no at that time in math, physics, medicine, and even geography. I don't think I'll manage to build a steam engine, but I can certainly fast-track how quick someone else get to it. Story 8. The 1600s is not the 1800s or the 1900s. It's a whole different era of technology. I don't know how a cotton gin works or any of that. I could probably invent a better bread slicer or something steam-powered, but I'm not familiar with 1600s era technology. Maybe a hurricane lantern or cast iron frying pans. I'm pretty good with both of those, and windproof oil lanterns are exceedingly useful. I might be able to invent those. What I do know is what a map of the Americas looks like, and I know where most of the major population centers are. So I could be an excellent land surveyor and explorer, and I could go found a bunch of cities and change history. Also, I wouldn't allow slavery in my port cities because fuck the Confederacy. Story 9. You people crack me up. You all are going to bring steam engines and electricity and industry to a time and place that has absolutely no use for this, especially once you account for the eye-watering cost. Add to that the fact that everyone here is just presuming that a basic understanding of a mechanical principle is sufficient to execute that principle in material reality. Do you know how fucking difficult it is to bore a cylinder by hand? Do you have the faintest understanding of the material and industrial capacity of the 17th century? Iron is so expensive that anything you have made will be charged by weight, not labor. Lathes are powered by humans. Precision screws don't exist. Basic units of measure aren't even standardized. And fucking forget about steel. Steel is as precious as gold, while simultaneously being utter crap. Steel is the answer, by the way, at least from a technological perspective. Crucible steel is completely within the technological capacity of 1600s Europe. It's already being made on the Indian subcontinent by then. But the metallurgy is so poorly understood. People at the time thought that steel was an ultra-pure form of iron. They knew carbon did something, but they didn't know what, nor that they needed to shield the whole process from oxygen. Go to Sheffield and you'll find the clay needed to make crucibles as well as the furnaces capable of providing the heat. It will take some trial and error, but eventually you can set yourself up as a steel and cutlery baron, changing the course of European history. Story 10. I know how to turn pretty much any sugar or starch into alcohol. Yes, they already had alcohol, but I've got recipes. The English would just be discovering precursors to gin, but I know how to make it taste good and not kill the person drinking it. I'm pretty sure bourbon wasn't invented until the 1700s, so I've got that. And so many beers haven't been invented yet. Along with the technologies to make them safely, I could have a whole booze empire. Story 11. Pockets in women's clothing. In 2000, I went with the chorus I sang with on a concert tour in Hungary. I bought a custom leather jacket from a tailoring shop in a department store advertising 24HR delivery. I wanted an inside jacket pocket, and they were thoroughly confused. With the language barrier, we were mostly pantomiming to one another, but he kept indicating that the jacket wouldn't hang right because the pocket would be in front of my boob. I finally got him to understand that it just needed to be placed lower. He got really excited. Next day, when I went in to pick it up, just about every saleswoman in the store showed up to watch me try it on and see the miracle of an inner pocket on a woman's jacket. When I dropped my phone in it and buttoned the jacket, which hung just fine, there was a chorus of "ooh" they all wanted to see. He was grinning so wide with pride that my husband joked that he thought his face was going to crack. I have a feeling that became a staple offering in his business. Lovely country. Nice people. I hope he sold a lot of them. Story 12. Am I allowed a study period to learn about 1600 to 1610? Either way, medical hygiene. But if I'm allowed a day of cram time before I go, weapon tech and carbon steel in addition to medical hygiene. Go back, find a remotish population, and firmly embed myself as a prophet. In 5-10 years of hyper-accurate predictions of everything major happening, I have my cult. Blacksmiths making the best steel in the world, modern battlefield triage, washing surgical instruments before and after, and advanced weaponry, like aimable crossbows, and knowledge of military history and tactics from 400 years in the future. I would be a kind and generous god, but I would be a god. Story 13. I mean, there's a few simple mechanical things we have now, like flush toilets, that are trivial to build. The problem would be getting the materials, I think. Nah, I'll just invent something simple like the one-time pad, 19th century. All you need for that is a writing instrument, something to write on, a way to make random numbers, and some basic math. In the 17th century, random numbers can be had from using things like nature. Sure, it won't be as perfect as what we can get today, but the code breakers have the same issue I would. Then I just need to convince the local lord that I have this amazing way to transmit unreadable messages to people and see if he's interested. Story 14. The pin tumbler lock and modem door handles. Maybe toilets. Maybe rudimentary showers and running water with one of those simple pumps that only requires a river to get some simple, inefficient pumping done. It's called a slam pump or something. There's a practical engineering video on it. Maybe some other gear-related things. Conveyor belts, the concept of a moving assembly line. The concept of an assembly line. There's literally thousands of modern mechanical devices that are relatively simple but used absolutely everywhere today. Just nobody had invented them yet. Human technological progress went fucking bonkers in the last 160 years. A lot of things are pretty ancient, but a lot of things are really, really recent. Hell, the lock mechanism for those cheap plastic folding tables? That probably didn't exist yet. I'm not sure the machine for rifling barrels and guns existed yet either. Modern bullets definitely didn't, but I don't remember the material needed to make a percussion cap work. So, a few things if I can find a patron. I can't go full Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, Mark Twain's isekai novel from the early 1900s, but I could make a not insignificant difference. Story 15. I would be able to make a basic glider, I guess, then perhaps convince some monarch to fund my research into flying. I know nothing about metallurgy, but perhaps I could guide someone to make a basic combustion engine to run on gassed wood or paraffin. What I would probably do, though, is travel to California to be in the gold rush area before everyone else, or do the same, but for silver mining in Sweden, Norway. Story 16. Nothing. And neither could anyone in this thread with their wild ideas about steam engines, electric motors, radios, and inventing calculus, with their B's and C's in calc courses. You're telling me you have all the knowledge and skill to turn a bag of rocks, iron ore, all the way to a steam engine? The fact that you once made a project demo with already precision-machined parts doesn't cut it. Story 17. This reminds me of a book series called Destiny's Crucible by Olin Thorensen. Basically, a modern-day dude who happens to be a chemist with some hobbyist history background is sent to another planet with humans in the early 1700s. He starts inventing shit to save the people on the island he is on from a big empire. The dude makes gunpowder from bat shit and invents napalm to fight them off. The most impactful things from the story were teaching them the scientific method and standardizing all their tools and measurements. The last book left off with him basically about start the industrial revolution on this little island with steam power and electricity. Story 18. Depends on the level of funding I can get. As a peasant, nothing. As like the King of Spain's 1600s, Spain was a rising major colonial power, and was by far the richest and most powerful nation at that time. Personal head of economics and developments probably involves blowing the king tbh quite a lot. Main thing will be the production line method, instead of building one by one for manufacturing everything, and manually pulled pulley-operated gantry cranes for factories. It wouldn't be nearly as good without high-quality steel, but a lot better than plain lifting by hand. This will massively increase the production of everything, as back then, lack of industry was the biggest problem for everyone. Large, preheated air, fan-powered blast furnaces, blad furnaces were what allowed steel, instead of pig iron and wrought and cast iron to be produced, and was what allowed the Industrial Revolution. Then would be paper and Chinaware, as both back then were only made by the Chinese, and in the 1600s would be the time of the Ming collapse. So suddenly, an even larger source of paper in China while the original source dried up would make massive economic returns, as well as paper being essential to a centralized administration, which would be infinitely better for the state than the still clinging on federal period of the time, as that was what rulers, particularly the French, were already trying to do. To that end, the implementation of a police force, nationalized prison and labor camp system, and a security service/intelligence agency, secret police, would ensure the nobles' and burghers' loyalty and the power of the state. Removable block printing presses, something which didn't happen until the 1700s in Europe. I know the Chinese had them. However, Mandarin is super hard to print using removable blocks. There are 2,000 characters required for very basic text alone, and which triggered the scientific innovations of the Enlightenment basic vaccinations, using samples of smallpox and the bubonic plague grown in seaweed jelly, then heated to kill the bacteria, and the use of distilled alcohol and fire for sterilization of medical equipment. Basic vaccinations will cause a population boom and massively impact the impact of diseases. So will sterilization of wounds and sterile medical equipment, removing the risk of infection in semi-modern medicine. Tonic water, South America already has everything you need, just need to actually make the tonic water. Then Spain can go and take over Africa too, without dying of malaria. And high school algebra, math allows structural supports to be worked out. It allows the calculation of geological and foundational suitability and strength, properties of various materials and ballistics calculations to be done, something that is super underrated. And rifling, the barrel and breech lock for cannons. And TATP, not thermite since aluminum requires the use of massive amounts of electricity to produce, and the use of cased ammunition and primers for artillery. This will make all artillery a lot safer, and make all artillery far more efficient to reload, increasing firing rate by an order of magnitude, and breech loading and rifling will massively increase range and accuracy, thereby making artillery highly effective, plus the use of upper and lower receiver design for small arms, as well as the use of breech loading, rifling, bolt lock for firearm actions, the use of detachable box magazines for firearms, and the fire control group, gun sights, and manual firearm safeties, allowing the use of repeating firearms using cased ammunition like pump shot guns, bolt-action snipers, and heavy anti-armor, Knight's machine guns, and lighter bolt-action rifles, and handheld submachine guns. This will instantly make cavalry and the tercio, and line infantry in general obsolete. Story 19. Assuming somehow I don't have to worry about actual survival when I arrive to this time period, what could I invent? Not much, really. Assuming I had the means, plenty of paper/writing utensils, time, etc., I could possibly do something similar to what Leonardo da Vinci did, in that I would be able to draw out a bunch of ideas, although my drawings would be far less technical, even with modern knowledge. Although considering he died nearly 100 years prior to my arrival, anything I might be able to come up with will have already been drawn up by him. Story 20. Unless you're an engineer, scientific, or doctor, pretty sure most of us would not successfully invent anything, and that without considering obtaining the funds. We are too dependent on modern electric machinery to do things. 1600s were mostly a time where natural and mathematical sciences developed so they could lay the foundations of mechanical theory that resulted in the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century. Medicine and anatomy especially made great advances at that time, Goodbye humor theory, as well as mathematics and astronomy, which ironically we are going backwards nowadays with the flat earth thing. But most of all, geography and natural sciences, thanks to triangular trade. Story 21, probably a basic generator. Think about it. Copper and lodestone occur naturally. Head to the local blacksmith and become an apprentice to gain access to the furnace. Collect and melt down copper into longish bars. Figure out a way to make wire from it, probably smashing it flat and cutting thin strands from it. Connect the wires together and wrap around an iron core. Do that a couple times. Build a wooden jig to mount it all on. Mount some lodestone, enough to induce current on your rudimentary coils, on a water wheel, then set it all up in the local river. It would be a long process, but it would be interesting to see how it could be applied, assuming you get any useful current out of it. Story 22. Well, with my rudimentary knowledge of the fundamentals of flight, I am pretty sure I could construct a glider. It wouldn't be carbon fiber and Dyneema construction, but I'm sure I could make something fly. I could construct a very crude battery. I'm not going to be making my own blue LEDs, but I could probably get electrolysis going or some other useful low-voltage task. I might also introduce the septic tank. People were good at digging back then. Story 23. The treadle-powered pottery wheel. I have the original Bernard Leach treadle wheel plans that were developed in the 1920s and can probably build one with only hand tools if required. Given time, I could memorize the plans, but being able to take a paper copy would be nice. I also know how to build kilns to fire said ceramics. It is tech that wouldn't get me burned at the stake and would be very useful. Also can make easy-to-use water filters with pots, too. Story 24. I think the concept of hydro dams is fairly easy, but I wouldn't know how to get the power from it, and have no electricity to use it anyway. Refrigerator would be useful, but no idea how. Maybe some structural stuff, like how to build a proper brick house with basic plumbing. Could probably make a pretty decent toilet or shower. Maybe practical stuff like trash management, like licking up trash once a week. I reckon you'd walk around all day going, there's an easier way for that, so you'd be the annoying know-it-all. Story 25, the knowledge of what's possible. I'd be talking with artisans that had the ability to build stuff, try to organize traders into cooperative factories, and mass manufacturing of the basic parts and tools used on making other machines, basically introducing standardization and leapfrogging Ford. Trying to build an inventors guilds working in group and leapfrogging Edison on the lab idea. The improvements and efficiency increase of manufacturing tools and agricultural machines, lowering the prices, increased quality in maritime tools and weapons, and improved mining tools, maybe even directing them on building the first mining pumps, should start the ball rolling early. Story 26. I understand just enough about internal combustion engines that I could probably hire metallurgists to help me develop one. Lots of things from medicine, disinfectants, farming, that I've never made, but I could describe it to skilled people enough to create it before it would have been invented. Airplane wings I know a lot about, but I'd need a skilled tradesman to put the design into application. Stuff like that.